Welcome to Olivia's Blooms. If you are new to my channel, I'm gardening in Charlottesville, Virginia, Zone 7B. I'm a home gardener who loves growing my own cut flowers and home decor with a focus on sustainable, regenerative, and eco-friendly practices. But most importantly, I'm here to support, share with, and learn from other gardeners, so I hope you will join me in growing this amazing gardening community. Hey guys, welcome back to Olivia's Blooms. Today I'm going to give you an update on how all of my cool season hardy annuals are doing, both the ones that I overwintered over the fall and the ones that I planted in very early spring. It's March 3rd here in Virginia, and I'm hoping to have flowers, my spring flowers, in about 5 to 6 weeks. They should start blooming, but depending on the weather, that could take longer or even be sooner. But if you're like me, I just love seeing how other people's crops are doing. And I'm going to show you things that are going well and things that maybe aren't going well that I'm a little worried about. We're going to start outside, and then I'm going to take you down again in my grow room and just give you a quick overview of what's growing down there as well. But we're going to start out here with what I'm currently hardening off. And no surprises here, my cat Chase is going to be modeling our garden off today. Hi, Chase. So right here is Hormonum sage, which I got as a filler slash foliage accent. I have never grown this before, and I have to say I think this was the easiest thing I have ever grown from seed. It germinated in less than 24 hours in these small soil blocks. And you could see here's one of the lavenders I just couldn't bear to throw away, so I put it in a block that didn't germinate in here. So there is one little lavender, but these guys just grew so fast, so healthy. I have done nothing to them, so I'm gonna plant them out here either today or tomorrow. We've got a couple weeks of weather in the mid 40s to 60s. I think we even have a 70-degree day. And if these, oh, Chase. If these do well, this is going to be a staple in my business because it was so easy. And then here I've got a couple trays of the ranunculus that have not sprouted yet, but I still have hope they might. So this is another reason why you want to pre-sprout ranunculus, because a lot of them, well, not a lot of them, but if you have a good crop of them, most of them should sprout, but there are ones that don't. And so because I'm trying to save every little spot in my garden this year for my business, I'm only planting the ones out that have sprouted. These I'm going to leave here. I'm going to give them maybe another week, and if they haven't sprouted by then, I'm going to toss them. And if you're wondering what these guys are, these are some calendula that germinated a little bit later than the others, and a stock that my husband accidentally dropped and I tried to replant it. We'll see how it does. Also, while we're out here, these are pots I planted in the winter. How beautiful. They are still looking gorgeous. Let's start with the things I direct sowed last fall. Here is a mix of white finch orlea, and I think there might be some Queen Anne's lace in here as well. They look very similar. And these are going to be some beautiful filler for me here early in the spring. But if you want to see how I planted these, this is maybe one of the easiest things. I know I just said the Hormonum sage was the easiest to grow from seed, but this might actually have been easier because I literally threw them on the ground and stomped on them. And look at how well they're doing. The spacing was a little challenging. I tried to move them around, thin them out a little bit, but the ones I moved did not seem to love it. You can see one here, kind of discolored. We'll see if those bloom. But at a minimum, I gave them the space they needed. Here are my sweet peas that I've planted out. You'll see them all over the garden. Now, these are in a little rough shape because we did have some really cold nights, and I did not protect these. These are for me, these are not for my business. And you could tell how I treat flowers I plan to sell versus flowers that are just for me. Here's another super easy, beautiful filler coming up in between my tulips, and this is Pink Beauty Saponaria, another one that I literally just threw on the ground, and it spread itself everywhere. I have thinned them a little bit, but you can actually grow them pretty close together. And these will be another very early spring filler. Sorry for the bumping. My cat keeps knocking into the hand that's holding the camera. Chase. This here is some blue globe echinops. I just have a few that survived, but these are so pretty. I'm really excited, and I want to use these dried. Something that's crazy to me is this is the full star blue anemone that I left in the ground by accident. I tried to pull them all up. It is March 3rd, and we have blooms on these. That blows my mind. It is so early to have blooms. But because this looks so healthy, I might leave them all in the ground this year. It's a lot of work digging them up, and if they look this healthy after staying in the landscape, I think it's worth keeping them there. And I have a lot of double anemones that I'm going to be growing this year. Another easy direct sown plant. Look at all my larkspur. It's so healthy and beautiful. I cannot wait to harvest these beautiful tall spikes. And then mixed in between, it looks really similar, but it is different, is Nigella. I have a lot of Nigella. I didn't plant this Nigella seed here. I planted it a few feet down that way, if you saw it in my other video, but some of it made its way here, and that's fine. You can see the slight difference between the Nigella. It has a long stem with several sets of leaves on it, whereas the larkspur has a short stem and just one kind of round set of leaves, but the leaf shape is really similar. Here is the rest of my Nigella. I really need to thin this out. It's looking a little yellow. We've gotten a lot of rain. But this should be a really nice early spring filler flower to go with my Whitefinch Orlea and Pink Beauty Saponaria. Just a quick peek at these sweet little snowdrops, but I can't stop and show you everything or this video will be 2 hours long. But right behind it is the area that I sowed my Sahara Rudbeckia, and I had a ton come up, but disappointingly, I only see 2 that have survived right here, and I was so excited for that. It's such a beautiful flower, but I do have a lot of this Coreopsis. It's red and yellow and will be really great in fall or more warm colored bouquets as a nice filler as well. The yarrow I planted in my landscape is looking okay. This area got super waterlogged, so I'm a little worried about it, but it's holding out all right so far. I may not get much out of it this year, but I want to develop a nice big yarrow patch here for some perennial cut flowers. And back here we have my Sweet William. I planted that from seed when we moved in fall 2022, so I'm really hoping I get some blooms out of these plants. I've been keeping them alive for a while. And here's another anemone on this side that I forgot to dig up. Also looking super healthy, but no buds on this one yet. Here's my new flower bed, and if you can see, it's a little hard to see, but tons of my cover crop coming up, which is really exciting to me. I want to get that soil life growing. It's going to be a little bit of a challenge, I think, to cut this all down when I'm ready to plant this bed up, but I think it will have been worth it in terms of the help that this cover crop is providing to the soil. I have planted a couple experimental things in here, some early calendula, this is Zeolites calendula, a couple extra dusty miller I happen to have on hand. The cover crop is looking great. If you saw me sow Bells of Ireland in the fall, here's the one that I have remaining. Oh, nope, there's another one back there, if you can see it. So I have two of them. Some more sweet peas. All right, now we're in my cut flower beds for my business, and let's talk about stock for a second. You can see these are successions, but you wouldn't know it. They are all different sizes and not necessarily in the order that makes the most sense. So these big ones here I started in January in the big soil blocks. They've been the best looking ones I grew out of that batch. and they've been doing pretty well. I planted them out about, I want to say 3 or 4 weeks ago. The ones I started at the same time in the small soil blocks, you can see a lot of them have died. I think they don't like our temperature swings, and they didn't have the healthiest start to life. A couple of them are okay. And then let's start with these. These were my next succession, and I started these in the leftover small soil blocks with the Lisa Mason Ziegler recipe that I had before I knew how bad that cocoa coir soil was. These didn't do great. I'm not expecting much out of these, and you can see again a couple of them have just died. Now this back here is my first succession where I was like, I'm doing them all in the big soil blocks with the wool, and you can see how healthy and happy these are. I had to plant a couple over here as well. These are also different varieties, and that might be some of the difference in the color and the size that you see, even a little bit on the leaf shape. So these were the pastel mix I started with. These back here are Ket's Formula Mix and Stock's Champagne. So the rest of my successions hopefully will look like this and not like this. And those little tiny ones I planted as an experiment, most of them died. None of them are looking great. So I'm probably gonna toss those from now on. Not much to see in this bed, but this is the second succession of ranunculus and anemones that I pre-sprouted. A couple of them have started to come up. I did manage to get my hands on some more. So if you saw my ranunculus disaster video, I think it's gonna be okay. I'm just gonna have them later than I really wanted, but I'm gonna have enough, I think. And I know for sure I'm gonna have some gorgeous anemones. Look at how happy these are. Here is my very first snapdragon bed, although you can probably tell it's not purely snapdragons. I did put up this jute netting because this bed is all planted up. I'm still struggling with getting this netting taut. I might have to do some adjustments in the corners. But I want to show you how the snapdragons are doing. They're looking very happy. This is one of the ones that both came up in the same small block that I left together to see how they would do, so they're fine so far. They're doing just as well as the ones that I planted by themselves. And I'm gonna pinch about half of these soon and not pinch the other half as sort of first succession. And then here are some ranunculus that were left in the ground over the fall. Look at how great they're doing. Again, I think I'm gonna leave my ranunculus and anemones in the ground this fall and just give them a little protection if it gets really cold. A little hard to show you these through the netting, but these back here are my overwintering snapdragons. Tons of stems. I only pinched them once, but I think the cold might have caused them to branch a little bit more. I'm not sure if any of you have experienced that, but you can see the size difference between these I planted in the fall and something like this that I started in early January. And then I also had some yarrow in this bed that I'm just letting flower because it looks so beautiful and happy, and then I'll move it over to my yarrow patch. Second ranunculus bed. This one I started 2 weeks before that other one. You can see a little bit more growth in these, but still pretty small. And then an update on my lasagna bed experiment. I would call the tulips and daffodils successful. You could see some of the daffodils are already almost blooming. This was a mix, so they aren't all the same variety, which might account for the difference in size of these. Same with the tulips. The tulips were not all the same. What I'm worried about though is I'm not seeing a lot of ranunculus growth. There should be 16 ranunculus in here. I see 2, maybe 3. And 3 out of 16 is not great. It's possible they're a little bit behind, but because the bed was so wet when I took off the hay, I'm very worried that a lot of the ranunculus corms rotted over the winter. And if those don't come up, I'm not going to hold out much hope for the dahlias because they are just as rot sensitive. And I will remember this for next year because these were the ones that I covered in hay. And these ranunculus were not covered at all, with, at least not with a giant stack of hay, just a little layer of leaves. So this seems to be the way to go. I just have to show you this little patch. It keeps getting bigger and bigger. I think I had one of these plants last year and it just seeded itself everywhere, and it's just this little pocket of happiness that keeps getting bigger. I love it. Here's my second bed for my new cut flower business. I do have the plastic netting up here. I had enough left over to do this one bed. It'll be a good test for me to see if the jute netting can work as well as the plastic netting. I'm going to use the jute netting on this bed, and if you look closely, lots of cover crops coming up in here as well. I also seeded in this bed. It's very hard to see, but I seeded some of those cold weather annuals that I talked about in my what cool flowers I'm growing in 2024. So here we have some bupleurum. I direct sowed this a couple weeks ago, and I'm getting pretty good germination on this. Also, this is probably really hard to see, but I have some copper plume atriplex sprouting, and again, this sprouted in late February. I also have some Phacelia coming up. It looks very similar to the bupleurum. And I did plant some crusts in here and some lupins. We'll see if those come up. They might be, but it's hard to tell the difference between those and the cover crops. All right, so that was what the outside's looking like, and now let's go in the basement. Okay, we're back down in my basement grow room, the place where I've been spending a lot of time lately. And let me show you what's going on down here. The first thing I'll show you is I was not planning on sprouting my dahlias yet. We're still about 6 weeks away from our average first last frost, and I might even wait a little bit longer than that to put these out. But these dahlias, the Emery Paul, oh, I forgot my label. These are all Emery Paul, and she started sprouting in her bag that I am saving her in. So they were ready to start growing, so I'm potting them up and may put them out in about 6 weeks if the weather looks ready. On this shelf we have another one of my successions of stock, and I do this about every couple days, and then in a week I will probably be hardening these guys off. Here's the second round of straw flower that I sowed, and I'm so disappointed because I sowed a batch of these 6 weeks ago that I would have been planting out now and have straw flowers super early, and I did that last year and I loved having them early, but those straw flowers did terribly. I put that video up on Instagram if you saw, because of the soil I used. Again, my earliest plantings had some of the worst soil. So these I re-sowed about only less than 2 weeks ago, and look at how great they're doing. So I will have straw flowers, but not as early as I'd hoped. Things don't always go as planned. Another succession of stock. I think these are about the same age as those guys. This succession of stock is a little bit earlier, and then you'll notice some cameos, again, by some lavender that I could not help but try and save in any extra block I had. I cannot wait till these are bigger so I can just rub them and smell that lavender smell. Up here is a mishmash of things that didn't go well, but they're looking okay now. I have some blue larkspur that I tried indoors because I wanted a little bit of blue color. The ones I have outside are all salmon. These are the snapdragons. These were started on the same date as the ones that I showed you outside. And look how terrible they're doing. Again, this really bad soil. I have a tray of calendula back there, another succession. Here are my lavender plants that I was not planning on growing this year, but just did it as an experiment. Now you can see here, I took the seeds that germinated and I put them all in these blocks, and not a great survival rate. I think that's typical of lavender. I have been keeping these on the drier side because they like a temperate climate. But I'm not sad about having, 5, 6, 10 lavender plants extra. I love lavender. I don't think you can ever have enough. Just gotta find space for it. These are some Victoria Blue salvia that I am doing for an event. Now, I'm not doing events with my business, but my older sister is having a family reunion at the Outer Banks and asked if I could bring flowers. So I'm gonna try and bring some red, white, and blue and some beautiful flowers for that. That's gonna be fun. Here's my second succession of snapdragons. Oh, and I gotta show you guys this. Okay, these guys are looking pretty happy and healthy, right? So I wasn't super happy about the germination rate I was getting in the small soil blocks with snapdragons, and I can show you an example. This was my first attempt at a second succession of snapdragons, and look at that's not great germination. I'm not sure why that happened. These two are loving their life in these soil blocks, but I think one's just germinated now, and it's, when did I sow these? I sowed these on January 21st, and they're just germinating now. But what I had immediate success with, and I highly recommend if you want to grow snapdragons, is I took this 4-inch, is it a 4-inch? 4-inch container. I sprinkled snapdragon seeds all over the top of this. Let me give you a better look. I sprinkled snapdragon seeds all over the top of this, and I just gently tapped them in. I kept this well watered. I put it under on the heat mat directly under a light. Let me show you. And I put one of these domes over it, and I had the best, fastest germination that I've ever grown snapdragons before. This method was inspired by a lot of people who use channel trays, and you might be worried that if you grow snapdragons like this, how are you going to get them out of there without breaking them? Well, I gently pried them up with a little tool, and I planted them in those soil blocks I just showed you. So they're doing fine. They do just fine being pulled out and placed gently in a soil block. You just got to be a little careful. So if you're struggling with snapdragon germination, I would try that method. But now I have a problem, which is I can't throw these away. What am I going to do with all these beautiful little snapdragons? I'm going to have to pot these up. It's going to be a lot of work, but I'm just probably going to give them to friends and anyone that wants them, because I can't just throw them away. They're so cute. Here's my tray of Cyanoglossom, or forget-me-nots. This is the blue variety. Really great, easy germination on these. And this is going to be for some pretty spring filler. Up here is my very last sowing of stock. I'm not sure if these are going to make it. It might get too warm too fast, but I wanted to experiment and see how late it makes sense for me to plant successions of stock, because this year is as much about learning as it is about making money with my business. I know you're all very interested to hear how people's experiences with the Flora Originals are going. I showed this on my Instagram, but the spun sugar celosia is doing really well. I did 1 seed per block, so you can see the germination rates. These are all spun sugar. And this is more plants than I need, so I am happy with this. And down here is what I'm currently germinating. It's empty, so I'm gonna move it out of the way. Oh, I lied. This is my last succession of stock. These typically germinate very quickly, so you can see one there. And over here, I've got purple basil and lemon basil. I'm expecting those to germinate soon. In my experience, basil usually germinates pretty quickly. I planted on the same day as I seeded those my first floret zinnias. And I know lots of you bought her gorgeous zinnias, so I wanted to show you how those are doing. It's just, these are less than 2 days old. let me see if I can get you a good angle here, but pretty good germination so far. I definitely do not have room for if every single one of these germinated. I don't think I have very even germination because you can see some of these popped, but a lot of them haven't. I planted 1 seed per cell here. So I have found that typically I don't get very even germination with any kind of zinnias, so I'm okay with that. So far, out of the 60 I planted, I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. About 18 have cracked so far, which is pretty quick. So I will keep you guys in the loop on how these do and how many I end up getting germinated total. Another tray of Victoria Blue Salvia. I have a lot of these. I'm hoping to dry a lot of them actually because I don't have a lot of beautiful blue dried flowers and I think they'd be nice to throw in the mix. And that's everything down here. So I'm pretty happy with how things are going. I know not everything that I'm attempting to grow is gonna work out perfectly, but like I said, I'm gonna learn so much this year. I'm growing a lot of things I've never grown before, so I'm trying to manage my own expectations, and I'm doing the best I can researching it, but I also know I'm just gonna have to learn by doing. So, but this is what's going on in my garden. I would love to know how your flowers are doing, whether it's for your own cutting garden or if you're a flower grower, farmer like me also. So thank you for taking a peek at my very early spring or very late winter garden. I hope you guys had as much fun as I did. Thanks. Okay, this is not helpful. Area got really waterlogged. Oh, jeez.